U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard is back in the U.S. after a trip to Syria, which has seen much violence and devastation.
She even met with the Syrian president, a meeting not everyone is happy with about this morning. Joining us now to talk more about her trip and what she learned is U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Good morning to you, Congresswoman.
Good morning. Aloha, Ron. Aloha, Christine.
Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. I know how busy you are. I got to ask you straight off the top, as 12 hours later now, since this all surfaced, at least publicly and to the rest of the world, are you surprised that you find yourself defending your trip, the 7-day trip, first of all, that was labeled as secret and even fact-finding, but do you find yourself defending yourself? Surprised about that?
Look, there is a lot of controversy around the situation in Syria, and quite frankly, a lot of people, especially here in Washington, who are so committed to continuing our country's waging yet another regime change war in the Middle East, that they're trying to defend their position, of which there really is no defense. When you look at our country's recent past of conducting regime change wars in Iraq, overthrowing Saddam Hussein, in Libya, overthrowing Gaddafi, and now waging this war along with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and other countries to overthrow Assad in Syria, in each of these situations, the people of these countries have resulted in greater suffering, greater loss of life, utter chaos, and it has been counterproductive because terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda have simply grown stronger in these countries. We've seen that in Iraq, in Libya, and we have seen it and are continuing to see this now in Syria. And this is what has been weighing heavily on my heart, the suffering of the Syrian people. And it's the reason why I went there. I wanted to see if there was, in some small way, that I could express the care, the aloha, the love that the American people have, that the people of Hawaii have for the people of Syria who are undergoing the most horrific atrocities, and to get a first-hand look at the situation there on the ground.
And Congresswoman, what was said to President Assad during your meeting? What did you tell him? And in exchange, what did he say?
Well, first of all, going on this trip, I had no intention of meeting with him. When I got there, I was presented with the opportunity to meet with him, and I felt it was important to take it simply because I believe strongly that we should be ready to meet with anyone if there's a chance it can help to bring about an end to this war that's causing the Syrian people so much suffering. And that's what we spoke about. We spoke at length about how to bring about peace to Syria, the shared interests that many nations have in defeating terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and the danger not only to Syria and the Middle East, but to the United States and the world if these groups are allowed to continue to grow stronger. And frankly, if the U.S. and other countries to continue to provide support and arms and weapons to those groups who are working with, alongside, and fighting under the command of Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. We spoke about how to ensure that Syrian refugees who have left Syria and gone into places like Jordan and Lebanon and across Europe, how they can return home.
Congresswoman, some would say, and there's different definitions of the word negotiation, but when you talk about the conversation that you had, at any time was there ever any negotiating going on between the two of you?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I appreciate that.
Those who, again, I mean, people are casting this trip in lights that are simply not factual. The bottom line is, whatever anyone's opinion is of Assad, the Syrian people must be the ones to decide what reforms are made to their country, who they want to lead their country. You know, the main thing that I heard from the Syrian people who I met with, who I spent the vast majority of my time with there, was why they asked me, why is the United States and its allies helping terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda to try to take over Syria? Because that is their objective. They asked me, Syria didn't attack the United States, Al-Qaeda did. And that's where my bill that I introduced at the end of last year, the Stop Arming Terrorists bill, is so important because it speaks directly to the pleas of the Syrian people to stop the United States, stop our American taxpayer dollars from funding and supporting both directly and indirectly these groups who are working with Al-Qaeda, the group that attacked us on 9/11.
You know, shortly in November, shortly after the presidential election, you had an opportunity to meet with the president-elect at the time, Donald Trump. Did Mr. Trump know about this trip that you were taking? And if he did, what did you both share to each other?
When I met with President Trump in November, I spoke directly to my bill, the Stop Arming Terrorists Act, the fact that I had planned to introduce it, the need for the United States to change its destructive, counterproductive policy of waging this regime change war in Syria, the horrific effect it is having on the Syrian people, and the fact that it is strengthening our enemy. At no time did the Trump administration, they were not aware of my trip. My trip was not mentioned. There was no coordination. There was nothing at all of the like.
And Congresswoman, where do we go from here then? What's next? And when will you talk to President Trump again? And what will you say?
Well, I am strongly urging my colleagues in Congress, in both the House and the Senate, to support this bill, the Stop Arming Terrorists bill, to bring about an end to this war in Syria, to bring peace to the Syrian people, to stop strengthening these terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and allow the Syrian people to determine their own future for themselves. I am calling on the Trump administration to do the same, to support this legislation, end this regime change war, and help end the suffering of the Syrian people so they can return to their homes and find peace once again.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thank you very much for taking some time out of your very busy schedule and sharing your thoughts on your trip, what it meant to you, and also the next steps as we move forward. Really appreciate your time.
All right, well, at 5:46, we'll have the stories you need to know about to get your day started. That's coming up.